Hello everyone, welcome today. I'm really happy to see so many people joining us today from different universities, different places. We are going to talk for a few moments about the interesting topic of intersectionality. And first, I will give you a few information. First is that this event will be recorded and uploaded to the UNIgreen YouTube channel. You can watch it later. If you have any question during the talk, feel free to use the chat at any time to ask a question. For your information, we won't see the question while we talk, but we have moderators who will collect the question and give them to us during the Q&A session that will happen at the end. And finally, if you need a certificate for your attendance to this webinar, feel free to send a request to this email address. You have unigreen.communication@gmail.com. So I'm going to start the presentation. And firstly, I'm going to present myself. I'm Thibaut Lamoureux. I work for the Haute École de la Province de Liège in Belgium. I work for the UNIgreen University Alliance, and I'm the co-creator of the Gender Equality Cell, a brand new cell that we are currently still building at the HEPL with the help of one of our guests that I will introduce later. First, before talking about the topic of intersectionality, I'm going to say a few words about the UNIgreen Alliance. The UNIgreen Alliance is a European university. It's supported by the Erasmus program, and it brings together 8 different universities that I will present just after. Our topic in UNIgreen focus on sustainable agriculture, green biotechnology, and environmental and life sciences. We also focus on One Health, which is a brand new topic. If you are not familiar with European alliances, it's a program launched by the Europe to encourage university to regroup around topics and to increase the networks between university and the industry. The point is to improve the student exchange, staff exchange, and all good practice exchange in general. It's the occasion to create numerous double, multiple degrees, Erasmus Mundus, and a lot of collaboration, and also collaborate around research and PhD topics. This program is created with the goal of increasing the European competitiveness and also to link us to the industrial world, not only in a local vision, but in a global vision. In UNIgreen, we are currently 8 university and school. We have the founder of the Alliance, the University of Almeria in Spain. We have the Agricultural University of Iceland in Iceland, Agricultural University of Plovdiv in Bulgaria, Instituto Politécnico de Coimbra in Portugal, Paris Subbiotech in France, Università degli Studi di Modena e Reggio Emiliana in Italy, Warsaw University of Life Science in Poland, and finally, Haute École de la Province de Liège in Belgium, where I come from. The alliance will certainly increase in size in the next years. So UNIgreen has a few objectives. The first one is to support the green transition. The idea is to provide education and skills to improve a new sustainable agriculture, but also greener biotechs and environmental sciences. We aim to boost innovation by creating collaboration between university and with the industry and to create new solutions in regional development. We tend to be globally connected to create international partnership. It's concern the student, but also the staff of the university. And finally, last but not least, the goal of UNIgreen is to promote inclusion. It is an important part of UNIgreen, and that's why we are gathering today to discuss the role of UNIgreen in promoting inclusion in the idea of offering an inclusive, diverse, and equitable education and research environment. So now that I have presented UNIgreen, I'm going to give a short introduction about the concept of intersectionality. And then I will present to you the guest that we have today that will present different part of this topic. Firstly, before starting with intersectionality, I need to do a short reminder of a few concepts of law. The first one concerns discrimination, and to remind you that there is two kinds of discrimination currently recognized by the law. Is a direct discrimination, which is defined as an unfavorable treatment explicitly based on a characteristic. The emphasis is on explicitly. And we have the indirect discrimination that is also recognized by the law, which is a criterion that appears neutral but disadvantage a group of people. If it's not clear to you, there is a simple example. For example, if you ban dog for allowing some space, you are actually giving a disadvantage to people that have service dogs, for example. So you are not explicitly targeting those people, but indirectly you are creating any problems. So the law is currently protected those two kinds of discrimination. This is not the only kind of discrimination that the law are protected, but those two ones are protected for a long time. And we will see by discussing about intersectionality that those two discrimination are not enough to protect everyone and every situation. So now I'm going to talk about the concept of intersectionality. I will start with the definition, and then I will explain to you where it comes from and what does it mean. The intersectionality is defined as the overlapping of social identities to create a system of oppression or privileges. A little bit of history before explaining to you what it means. The beginning of what we call directly the intersectionality come from with the Combahee River Collective, which was a collective of lesbian women of color. It was active during the 1974 to 1980. And it was a group that was created because those women felt that they weren't represented in the feminist movement, which was at the time mostly composed of white women. And they didn't feel represented in racial movement because it was mostly represented by men. This first collective created the Combahee River Collective Statement, which is a fundamental of social research. And they also defined the concept of political identities that define what people identify as. After this collective, there is also a trial that is really important for the explanation of the intersectional movement, is the trial of the Grandfarid versus General Motors. It's a group of 5 Black women who sued General Motors for discrimination, for racism and sexism, because they realized that Black women were targeted for being unjustly fired. The trial went in court, and the court divided the case in 2 parts. They say we are going to judge first the discrimination regarding the race, the social race, and the discrimination regarding the gender. And it happened that the court rejected the complaints because they quickly proved that General Motors couldn't be found responsible of sexism because they were hired women in the company, and they couldn't be accused of racism because there was Black men in the company. But in the end, they did realize that there was no Black woman in the company. So there was some kind of discrimination, but the current law weren't enough to take this concept in consideration. That's where the Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, professor at the UCLA, created a manifest in 1989 and defined the concept of intersectionality. She explained that in those type of cases, we cannot see the discrimination that the Black women were facing only by looking at the sexism or the racism. it was not one or the other, it was a combination of the two of them. So if I have to summary what she was saying at the time, is that the intersectionality was not a bit about adding oppression, it's about making them overlap and finding the intersection of two discrimination. This work was really important in the social study and in the law, and it leads in Europe to the creation of a new type of discrimination that is now recognized since 2010, the intersectional discrimination, based on the simultaneously on sex and one or more other prohibited grounds of discrimination. So the idea is to find the mix of two discrimination. So this is how we can define the concept of intersectionality. And we can also speak about intersectionalities because there are a lot of combination of discrimination that could happen. I gave you the example of the gender and the race, the social race, but I can also give you other examples from studies. This one published by the Williams Institute, which is also an institute from the UCLA, which showed the pattern of poverty in the LGBT population. And what we can see on this graph, I took only one graph of the studies, but we can see the risk of poverty rate depending on the sexual orientation, but also depending on the gender. And what we can directly see is that LGBT women, for example, have more risk of becoming poor than heterosexual men. So this is one example of the intersectionality of poverty, gender, and sexual orientation. Another example, a more recent one, published in 2023, that showed the impact of the epidemic of COVID-19 on ethnic minorities of students. So this is what they call BAME student, which is for a Black, Asian, and Middle Eastern student. And they focus on different type of studies. They focus on STEM studies, on artistic studies, on literature studies, to see if there was any differences. And as you can see in the graph, they firstly show that before COVID, in every type of studies, we can directly see that that BAME students have a less rate of success than students not belonging to those to the BAME categories. What they shown in the studies also is that the impact was increased during the COVID. So a same effect, which was the COVID, can have different impact on different population. It was more important for students coming from a minority than from the other student, meaning that we also have some kind of intersectionality here between the race, once again, and the effect of COVID-19. And those kind of studies are really important. There are a lot of type of example like this, and they will let us know that we cannot close our eyes to other factors when we look at some effect. In this case, for example, they say that the effect of COVID-19 must have been more important for some students because the poorer students have trouble to have access to computer, to follow remote classes, and doesn't have necessarily the same support or social group to help them. So those examples show you that intersectionality can concern a lot of type of discrimination. And I will give you a few examples to show you why intersectionality is really important to take into consideration if we want to reach equality. This is the last part, is to answer the question, why is intersectionality essential to achieve meaningful equality? I will show you an example, a really recent one, that is a campaign launched in France, to show you that the integration policy without intersectionality can actually increase some inequalities. So this is a program launched in France. It started in 2025, so it's brand new. It's called the Plan Filles et Maths, which translates as Girls and Math Plan. And it composed of 2 hours of sensibilization to gender inequality for STEM teachers. So it's mainly focused on sciences, STEM in general. And the point is to sensibilize the teacher to everything related to gender. What was put into consideration by Olga Paris-Romanescu, which is a Black mathematician from France, is that there was no regard of all the other discrimination. So the first result is that those politics will mostly benefit to white middle to high class girls. So they say that currently the way the program is created will only serve a small category and will increase the difference that already exists between white middle to high class girls and, for example, girls of colors. Also, this politics was not really well planned. In the article, they say that the politics was based on the culpabilization of women, saying that if they don't do enough STEM, it's because they don't have enough trust in themselves. And it didn't include a work against the violences against women. For example, they showed studies in 2023 where 50% of women in STEM say they faced violences in their work. I will show you 2 better examples. Still coming from France, is the case of the company L'Oréal, the famous company of cosmetic. I'm not paid by them, but I feel that their example is really interesting because they started in 2005 the creation of the World Direction of Diversity. The first idea was to just increase the level and the number of women in higher position. After that, they quickly open the direction of diversity to disabilities and ethnic origin, and they increase every year their action. In 2019, they shown that they have basically no salary gap between men and women. There's enough women in a higher position. They created in 2021 the board of diversity and include LGBTQIA+ topics too. What it involved for the company is that the company says that focusing on this equality has improved the involvement of the workers. When they do a survey, they have at least 10% of involvement more than the average of other companies. They say that it promotes the creativity and the collective performance of the company, and they give the proof that they have more than 10% of application than the other type of company that don't have this kind of diversity direction. So it shows a direct advantage for the companies to focus on the intersectionality of gender, of ethnic origin and disability. And the more they focus on it, the more it improves the environment for everyone. And there is another and last example from what is called the Cooperative U, which is a brand of French supermarket, where they actually started around a reflection focusing on endometriosis and chronic disease. They try to do some event and some possibilities for people with chronic disease to adapt their work. And they started disability sensitivity action to create a secure environment for people to share their difficulties. And what they didn't expect was that it allowed a lot of employees to share their difficulties. And for example, they say that it helped to the inclusion of diabetic people who were included in the disability plan. It helped destigmatize a lot of disabilities in the company and open the talk around difficulties that people may find within their work. And this is what they call the management with care, and they publish different articles about how to combine work and disabilities around workers. And what is really interesting with those 3 examples is that we have what we call the spillover effect, which is at first a concept from economic background, but it's now used in social economy, saying that they start by caring about what may seem like a micro event, and that can maybe help a few person, and that working on micro event will in the end impact the macro of a company, of a university. So focusing on what may seem smaller topics will in the end help a lot of person. This is the definition of the spillover effect, where one action has consequences on others. So I thank you for your attention. This is my introduction on intersectionality. My point was to demonstrate that intersectionality is essential to achieve meaningful equality. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And now that I have finished, I'm going to introduce you our speakers, our 3 speakers from today. I will start with Tindara Addabbo. She's from Italy, from the University of Unimore in the beautiful city of Modena. She's full professor in economic policy, Department of Economic Marco Biagi, and she's also a member of the UNIgreen Work Package 5. She is the coordinator of the Gender Equality Labs and the founder of the university startup IDEM, and she also coordinated the project of LETSGEPs. Those two, this startup and project focus on helping people, company, and university of reaching the gender equality. Our second speaker will be Ugla, Stefanía, Kristjönudóttir, Jónsdóttir. They are winning award Icelandic campaigner, writer, and feminist. So they work on the creation of a film project about trans life and trans experiences. They are columnists at the Metro UK, also co-author of the Trans Teen Survival Guide and Trans Survival Workbook. And they were listed between the 100 women from the BBC 2019 list of the most influential women in the world. They're also an advocate for trans rights in Iceland, which has one of the most innovative Gender Autonomy Act of Europe. And finally, we will have Bastien Bomans. They are the coordinator of the Gender and Equality Advisory Board of the Liège University. They are a PhD student at the University of Liège since 2020. They work in the post-colonial research unit's CREP. And the thesis topic is about queer and intersectional multidimensional reading of novel from Trinidad and Tobago and its diaspora. They're also the president of the Rainbow House of Liège, the Maison Arc-en-Ciel of Liège. It's a local LGBTQIA+ association. I will lend the room to all of them to do their presentation.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. First of all, I would like to thank all of you to be here with us in this important moment of our UNIgreen Alliance. And then I would like also to thank a lot Thibaut for his introduction to the topic that is really that has not only defined intersectionalities, but also show us actions that can be taken in order to being aware of intersectionalities in different organizations, and also what is the contribution to do so for the whole life of organization. What I'm going to introduce is basically this concept. Integrating intersectionalities with special reference to RPOs, but these can, of course, be considered also in other organizations. And first of all, I would like to make reference to a tool, a process that is now in our well recognized by the European Commission, that it is the Gender Equality Plan, and to see to what extent Gender Equality Plan can be aware of intersectionalities and what we need to do to allow all the process of Gender Equality Plan to be informed and to make and to address intersectional discriminations. Then I will just point to the data issues and also make some examples of actions that can take into account intersectionality. So, first of all, what is a gender equality plan? It is a set of commitments and actions that aim to promote gender equality in an organization through a process of structural change. These words are the definition that you can find in the Horizon Europe guidance on gender equality plans. And they are really very important because they talk about a process of structural change. JEPs aim to promote gender equality through the sustainable transformation of organizational processes, cultures, and structures that produce and sustain gender imbalances and inequalities. JEPs should address not only an organization's visible structure and practices, such as policies and procedures, but also consider how to evolve espoused values, what people say they believe, and underlying assumptions, unconscious belief, thoughts, and feelings, including in the production of knowledge and its application. Then, in another part of the Horizon guidance on gender equality plans, it is stressed that JEP is a strategic document that engages the whole of the organization. So, considering that, I can tell you that there is also, as Thibaut was mentioning, we have concluded in 2023, in December 2023, this project funded by the European Commission, and one of our action has been to produce also a handbook for a sustainable gender equality plan that can be that is free for everyone. You can download it from this QR code, and it is in different languages, the languages that were basically in our consortium. The consortium was made by the Mathematical Institute of Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts, University of Messina, University of Tirana, the Institute of Sciences del Mar in Spain, and Cergy Paris Université, and the Max Planck Institute. And we were basically the coordinator of the action, and had as a supporting partner for evaluation, Aachen University. So the aim of leading towards sustainable gender equality plans in research institutions was to help these 6 RPOs in design and implement gender equality plans together with gender budgeting, and as I was saying, was funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program that you can see. Then let's go to intersectionalities. As Thibaut was saying, basically they identify and address the specific needs and unique challenges faced by people at the intersections of various forms of inequality. And what is then the connection that we can make with the gender equality plan? So up to now, it is for being the gender equality plan used to address intersectionalities. In my opinion, they should provide a context analysis that recognizes intersectionalities and allows to acknowledge intersecting forms of discrimination by recognizing, for instance, that sexism can intersect with racism, ableism, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, or by age, or by migrant status. And this, as we will see later, is not so easy to be done. But also, after having a context analysis that can allow you to make a change, you should definitely design actions that are informed by intersectionalities and address those intersectionalities. Then, in the process, because it is also recognized by the guidelines of a gender equality plan and also on gender budgeting, that you must really have a process, and to have a process that is processes that should include, to really address intersectionalities, also different stakeholders, not only in one type of potential discrimination, but allow the diversity that it is in our institutions to be accepted and to be visible and to be included in the process. So I must tell you also that there is another very important point that is really very much connected to what we can recognize, and I showed you before. We should really foster research on measuring context by taking into account intersectionalities. And also, we should be able to foster research that is going to really evaluate then the impact of the policies and the actions in gender equality plan in terms of their impact on intersectional discriminations. The data issues. I go back to the Horizon Europe guidance and gender equality plans. They stress that as well as collecting data disaggregated by only sex and/or gender, organizations should consider breaking down the data further to explore differences between women and men based on other individual or group features, where data is available, such as people with a migrant or minority background, people with disabilities, people with low socioeconomic status or at risk of poverty, members of the LGBTQI+ community. This data will allow exploring the intersectionality of gender with other characteristics and potential grounds of discrimination, also known as gender plus, which can highlight specific areas requiring attention. The point is where data is available. So this, in my opinion, is very important to see, first of all, whether the research can allow us to address also the measuring of intersectionalities, and to make our institutions take into account intersectionalities and get data to address them. So what is then some example on policies that, for instance, address homotransphobia behaviors? So first of all, the institutions should make clear there should be a statement of prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and violence based on sexual orientation of gender identity. This should be really clear, but should not only be a statement. It needed to be then brought about in actions. So with the proactive measures like training for staff and students on topics like gender identity, sexism and minority stress, change name policies, then provide support and advocacy, include LGBTQI+ content in academic curricula to promote understanding and awareness, promoting visibility, involve LGBTQI+ communities in the process of JEP's design, and their implementation. Then, for instance, one very important action is to address student well-being and counseling informed of intersectionalities. So this means that we need to create services that can address intersectionalities by offering proper support in case it is needed. For instance, before Thibaut was making a reference to different types of intersectionalities. Are we really able to offer a support that can, for instance, address different languages or different needs by people who have different needs? Can we recognize them and support with proper personnel? Or develop also associations within, I'm talking now about university, but that should be done also in other organizations that basically can provide a community and support to other students and staff in contact with there should be also these association in contact with local NGOs to develop really a network with the society. Our organizations are included. That is also very important to develop something that is going to change not only our organization, our universities, but the social environment we are embedded. And we know that nowadays there is really much need of this change in perspective. And another policies that can be developed is the change name policy. We have been done this also in our university. So basically this can consist in creating an alternative identity that replaces the personal data with the chosen name, chosen by the person in the gender affirmation process within the administrative management IT system of the institution. But also we are now developing with talking about the environment, there are also institutions like municipalities that are part, for instance, of the READY network, that are really, this READY network is really ready to make changes in the societies, in the different local areas. And our university has really the luck of being in two different cities, and these cities are Modena and Reggio Emilia, both parts of the READY network. And also it is based, that is very important to stress, because before, when it was not based on gender self-determination, it make a while for a student, and not only or part of the staff, and was not really so much inclusive. So it is very important to base this on gender self-determination. The possibility of assuming a new gender identity is part, in our opinion, of the protection of fundamental rights, and is going to meet the need to guarantee conditions in which the recognition of gender identity is a determinant factor with respect to well-being and quality of study and work. I assure you that if this is really applied, implemented in our institutions, this, as Thibaut was saying before, is going to have a very important contribution, not only to the lives of people who really can suffer without this possibility, but of everyone in the institution that really can consider the fact that a right to respect being in a process of affirmation of gender, when we can see that diversity is considered a value and not something to be afraid of, being really accepted and considering as a value in our institutions, is really very important for the well-being of everyone within the organization, and in the social environment where the organization is included. And it is definitely very important not only to have in place that specific action, but also to make the institutions providing training, awareness event to monitor and monitor its impact. This action, for instance, is in the Gender Equality Plan guidelines for UNIgreen universities, and you can find it in one of our on the deliverable of the working group 5 I belong to. So for the moment is all for me, and thank you a lot for your attention.
So thank you very much, Tindara, for this interesting presentation. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We will read them later during the Q&A answer. I will let the room to Ugla.
Perfect, thank you. I don't have a presentation, so to speak, so I was just going to give more of a, I guess, of a personal story and an experience of how intersectionality can work in practice, because I thought that's always very, very useful for people to hear how it actually works when intersectionality is applied and when solidarity is applied amongst different groups. And to give you a bit of context, as was said, I've both lived in the UK and in Iceland. And when thinking about LGBT rights in two of these countries, it's a very different story. One story is a country that doesn't value intersectionality and solidarity, whereas Iceland, where I'm from, is a country that really has shown in practice how it can be beneficial for everyone when we do come together in solidarity and thinking about intersectional approaches. But to give people a bit more context who don't maybe know the situation in these countries, the UK is a country that once upon a time was very forward thinking and quite progressive on LGBT rights. And it has only been in sort of the recent decade where the UK has started to fall behind quite a lot on LGBT rights, and in particular when it comes down to trans rights and rights for trans people. And there has been a really hostile political situation there for the past 10 years, I would say, that sort of started when the UK wanted to update the Gender Recognition Act, which is a legislation that was passed in 2004 in the UK, which had to do with legal gender recognition and allowed trans people to change their legal documentation in the UK. Back in 2004, this was a very progressive legislation in a European context, but they haven't been able to update any other law since then, whereas other European countries have moved forward and have made these processes a lot easier. But what happened in the UK when this law was proposed to be changed back in 2016, there was some sort of a shift that happened and a campaign and a concerted effort that evolved from that, from sort of anti-trans groups and related sort of larger anti-gender movements across Europe that sort of seized that moment to really push forward a strong anti-trans narrative within the political and media landscape in the UK. And what happened as a result is that trans people have largely been victimized in the UK. They've been made to be the villains of practically everything you could possibly think of. There are negative news articles in every single newspaper there is in the UK, and as a result, the UK has sometimes got the nickname of Turf Island, just because of their sort of really strong anti-trans groups that have sort of dominated the political landscape and the media. And I think when you look at the numbers of anti-trans articles that are published in a single, newspaper, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles every single year, and it's quite shocking to see that, because as we know from research, trans people are less than 1% of any given population. So the sort of concerted effort against this very small group is a huge concern, and in the UK has been sort of seen as a diversion tactic in some ways, where certain groups of minorities are pitted against each other in order to sort of confuse and divert, rather than these groups coming together in solidarity and intersectionality. And the sort of narrative has been pushed that trans rights and women's rights are somehow in competition and they cannot be compatible. which in my opinion, and anyone who really sort of, I think, has researched this, says that they are completely compatible, and actually they're based on the very same fundamental principles of equality, freedom, and everybody being able to express and be who they are as well. So it's interesting to see that in the UK, how the story there has become very sort of anti-trans and very negative towards trans people, and we see the sort of consequences of that when we look at, for example, rates of hate crimes in the UK against the trans population. We see that hate crimes have increased in the recent 10 years, and they've never been higher in the UK, and that means that trans people are experiencing more hatred, more discrimination at work, within their family, on the streets, and in sort of every sphere that they inhibit as well. And the most serious crimes are, of course, vandalism, violence, and even murder. And in the UK in 2023, we saw, for example, the murder of a 16-year-old trans girl who was murdered by her peers in a public park in the UK. And those are some of the most extreme consequences that we see that this sort of concerted campaign and effort against trans people has, where it becomes such a violent and an horrendous crime against the trans person. And in the UK, there have been similar cases throughout the years, but it seems to have gotten quite more extreme as things have progressed. And not to bring a complete downer on it, I think it's still important to be able to think about what it means when there is a direction of this sort within a country, and what that can mean for vulnerable populations, whether that's trans people, whether that's immigrants, whether that's any other sort of minority that's vulnerable in society. We can really see the consequences when there is that concerted effort and campaign within politics and within media. But we also have examples of what can happen when we don't go down that route and down that direction. And that's sort of where we come to Iceland. But I also want to make a disclaimer that Iceland isn't perfect by no means. We still have our problems. There's still discrimination and prejudice that exists within Iceland. But I think we've done a better job of at least trying to move forward and defend LGBT rights and progress in that area. Because when we look at, for example, the UK and Iceland, these countries are completely different in their approach to these issues. So I guess the story in Iceland is that within our political landscape, there has always been sort of a majority support for LGBT rights when they have been pushed for and when they have been presented in Parliament, for example. So we've always had the sort of, I guess, the fortune of being a small country where it's easier to reach people, it's easier to speak to people. You have more access to policymakers, you have more access to people who actually want to make a change. And I think that really matters when you're trying to push for inclusion and intersectionality, and when you want to change law and you want to change policy. When you have more access to the people that have the power to do that, it's more easier to push for that. And that's what we had in Iceland with what was mentioned before, the Gender Autonomy Act, which is a legislation about trans and intersex rights in the UK, in Iceland. And basically what it does is that it allows trans people to be able to change their names and gender registration within the systems. It allows trans people access to healthcare. It bans interventions on intersex infants, and it basically is a very and one of the most progressive ones still in Europe, and it was passed back in 2019. But what was so impactful and I think powerful about this legislation is that so many different human rights groups and institutions came together to support this law, and we had an overall support from every feminist organization there is in Iceland, from the shelters. We had human rights organizations like Amnesty in Iceland, and all of these sort of major human rights organizations and feminist movement that sort of came together to support this legislation. And that was because we were able to foster a really great relationship with all of them. And through the process of creating and drafting that legislation, we had meetings with every single institution and body and whatever that was important that would somehow be impactful to this law, the prison service, the sport unions, anything that could have had to do with gender in any way. And actually we had really meaningful conversations with them, because as soon as you're able to sit down with people that are really willing to listen and willing to make a change, they start to realize that, you know, intersectionality, inclusion is simply about human rights and freedom and people being able to be themselves. And that's what really came through this process. And we're always very proud to tell the story that actually the legislation was formed by grassroots organizations and by people from these organizations and communities, rather than being created by a political party or someone who didn't really have that lived experience and didn't really know what it was like to be a trans person or an intersex person, and so on. And that, I think, really made this legislation that much more comprehensive, and it's often been said that this has been one of the best prepared legislations that has been passed into the Icelandic Parliament, because we took such a long time to do it and we really did it well. I think the process of creating it was somewhere between 4 and 5 years, and we saw the government of Iceland explode about 3 times, I think, in the time that we were creating the legislation. So there was also some political instability at the time, but it actually ended up being quite favorable for us in the end anyway. But there was a lot of things that lined up to make sure that this was possible. So we were quite fortunate with that in Iceland. And I think my message, I guess, is that there is an opportunity to make things really progressive and really focus on what's important. And we can see the difference when we, for example, compare the UK and Iceland in how their treatment of a population of people that is a vulnerable population can really be different. And actually, I think anybody who really values human rights and freedom would agree that Iceland has done a much better job at approaching these issues with sensitivity and consideration, and thinking about it from that wider perspective and that intersectionality, when different groups of people from different walks of life and different backgrounds come together to support a legislation for one group. Because actually, if we approve that we can take rights away from one group, we approve that we can also do it to other groups. And I think that's the fundamental part of intersectionality, is that we have to be able to think about this from a bigger perspective. And I think that's what we've been able to do to a certain extent, at least in Iceland with this case. But I think I've gone just about over my time, so I'm not going to speak any longer and let our next speaker speak. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Don't worry about the time. Thank you for your intervention. I will let now the room to Bastien.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you for the invitation, of course, UNIgreen members. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ugla and Tindara, for your presentations. They were absolutely amazing and very, really fascinating. I'm sorry if there are some repetitions here. I'm going to try to explain the different approaches that I have in my work. I actually occupy, as Thibaut said, different positions between association, institutional positions. So I'm going to talk about these different spaces. And I wanted to start with this specific context that we are living in. And I decided to entitle my presentation, as you can see here, Attacks on Intersectionality, Call for Intersectional Responses, because there is this specific context in which we live, and we've talked about this before, but it's very obvious that universities, not only universities, but universities that have been attacked recently by different governments. We can think about the Trump administration, of course, but there are others. And there is this narrative that is known as the anti-wokeist narrative. It is very important to focus on this discourse, because it's not a new political strategy, but it's very effective. So the anti-wokeist discourse is very much about how universities today would be threatened by activism, would be threatened by different fields like gender studies, post-colonial studies, critical race studies, and so on, but also by concepts such as intersectionality, there would be also some threats made by equality, diversity, inclusion policies. So there is a real fight against these forms of knowledge that work on understanding how inequalities are created, how they are fed. And it is it's very interesting to see that universities as spaces that produce knowledge, and these spaces are also spaces of power, of course. They are regarded as a place where political change can happen, and this is what's happening in Europe, of course, but in the United States, and I'm sure you've heard about this. I wanted to start with this to show that you can see it on the different images and maybe on the magazine cover. There is a link between race, gender, identities, identity politics that is always made, almost always made. And these attacks actually show what intersectionality initially tried to represent. It is the fact that systems of oppression, systems of inequalities are imbricated with one another. It really shows, actually, despite its intention to counter equality policies, well, it shows that we need to work on intersectional policies to counter these movements. As I said, this anti-wokeist movement is not new. It works on what is known as moral panics. I don't know if you know this work by Stanley Cohen. It was written in the 70s. It's a sociological analysis or theory. And it's quite obvious that what's happening with the anti-wokeist movement now is very much the creation of a moral panic, which is a narrative, a fake narrative about so-called folk devils that will be within society. And as it has been said by Ugla before, these folk devils are regarded today as transgender people, racial minorities, LGBTQI people, feminist movement, and so on. And the narrative says that because of these people, well, the societies would be at risk, and that the nations are going to fall down, and so on. There is this narrative. I wanted to talk about this because it's easy to see what's happening now and to understand what's happening, the dynamics, the political dynamics, through what has been written in the past. There is this interesting book by Francis Dupuy-Derry. If you can read French, it's quite interesting to see how universities are now attacked for these for these the development of equality and EDI in general. It's like history is repeating itself. So I've been talking about how there is a dominant discourse in the media, in some political parties that counter equality policies. But there are also, what intersectionality tells us also is how within communities there can be reproductions of violence. There are movements or discourses that aim for equality, but that reproduce these forms of violence. I think Ugla, you talked about TERFs, the TERF movement, which is the trans-exclusionary radical feminist movement, who are transphobic. Well, there is an equivalent with the LGBTQI movement. I'm going to focus on that now. And with two books I wanted to share with you today. There is Queer Lovers and Hateful Others by Jean Arita-Warren, and there is One Dimensional Queer by Roderick Ferguson. The idea is that the representation of the LGBTQI movement has been for several decades now more and more widened in the way that representing LGBTQI movement had been associated with whiteness. And it is a form of invisibilization that has been in the process that have erased in some ways the fact that people could be LGBTQI people and part of racial minorities. It is shown in films, it is shown in media, and intersectionality tells us that, well, of course, it's a problematic because it creates binaries. This is what you can find in Gina Ritton's book. There is the idea today that LGBTQI people are mainly white people. If you think about the movement, how it is represented, there is very much the idea that LGBTQI people of color do not exist, are not visible. This has been made also, this has made some LGBTQI people join some far-right movements in the sense that some LGBTQI people turned into, well, they accepted the idea that homophobia and transphobia were only committed by racial minorities. And it is fed by far-right discourses and anti-immigration policies that try to construct the idea that LGBTQI people would be victims and that we should stop the anti-immigration policies blocked access to non-white people and recreate and feed racist structures and racist discourses. So there is this binary, this polarization of identities, which the intersectional lens can deconstruct, and it's very much about representations. It's about how discourses are made on identity and how we can deconstruct that. Of course, it is very important to visibilize people who are at the intersection between racism, homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of discrimination. The visibilization of these people can actually put in question what we call homo-nationalist movement do. I wanted to also talk about how intersectional responses can be effective against these discourses. So we know, as Thibaut said, intersectionality is a concept as a great, it's not new either. It was initially theorized in the 70s and the 80s by the Black feminist movement, mainly in the US, but not only. And at that time, the idea was to visibilize specific experience of what it was to be a Black woman in the 70s and the 80s. The idea is that being a Black woman and being a white woman was not the same. At that time, it was experience, it was embodied experience that created knowledge. It was the production of knowledge through experience. And then intersectionality, as we know, has been taken by institutions, but it has been theorized. What I wanted to mean here is that the concept is very much between institutions, associations. It keeps a dialogue between these different spaces, and it needs to stay that way so that we can understand how discrimination works. Intersectionality today can be used as a lens to understand, of course, that identity and discriminations are multidimensional. As it has been said before too, coalitional practices are necessary and solidarities are also. But I wanted to say here too that the idea that multiplying perspectives on the production of knowledge on anti-discrimination law. It is a way of getting closer and closer to what equality actually is. To improve equality, diversity, and inclusion policies, it's very important to multiply these different perspectives. And one example of that is how it's very important within institutions and universities, especially where we know that the diversity that you can find in society is not the same as what you can find in universities. It's very important that the policies that we implement work on a bottom-up dynamic, so that people who are less privileged can actually speak, can be visible, can give their perspective. So I've been giving some maybe theoretical ideas about how intersectionality works in different parts at university, in different fields. I wanted also to maybe ask what we can do regarding intersectionality. I would say that first we can support the so-called folk devils. We can also work against fake news and demystify fake news and actually use the research that is done in universities and outside universities to demystify these fake news. I would also say that the fields of study, like gender studies, post-colonial studies, and so on, must be protected. Academic freedom is also threatened at the moment, so I think it's something that has to be defended, and EDI policies as well. Regarding practices and institutional practices, I think that, of course, we live in different countries, there are different governments, and we can not all act in the same way according to depending on the space that we are. But I would say that we should maybe try to navigate between the equality as a broad concept, because working on equality can actually respond to different needs. Different needs are different categories. If we talk about harassment, for example, it can work for different categories, but we have also to be very specific to respond to specific needs. In some cases, we have to try to see the blind spots, and that's what I think, that there are always blind spots. If we think through the intersectional lens, we can see that there is always an identity, some people that we can't, some experiences that we can't apprehend. And if we look for the blind spot, if we give a voice to more people, we are able to get closer and closer to what intersectional justice might be. And I'm going to conclude. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. I will be very happy to answer questions if there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bastien. That's really interesting. So thank you very much for the three speakers. Once again, as Bastien said, and I said a few times, don't hesitate to ask a question in the Q&A chat. So now we are going to go to the guided roundtable, where I will ask a few questions to the speakers, and feel free to answer and to participate to any of those questions. So I will start by an easy but personal question. Is I want to have your everybody's on screen. Yeah, okay, sorry. I want to have your opinion on how your intersecting identities influence your professional and personal experiences. So
I can go first.
Thank you very much.
I'll be brave. I'll be brave. I mean, I guess from my perspective, I mean, I would say I'm quite a privileged person in many ways, that I'm from Iceland, I'm white, I come from a middle class background. You know, my intersectionalities have more to do with my identity as a trans person and then as a woman. And I think that's where I can really notice those intersections of how I am treated very differently based on what people think of trans people, really. And, you know, I can't be a woman on a Monday and then a trans person on a Tuesday. Like, I'm these things all the time wherever I go. So I think that's an interesting experience. But I'm also a person who can inhibit spaces without people necessarily knowing that I am a trans person, and people will sometimes read me not being a trans person, and that gives me a certain amount of privilege as well. So I think intersectionality, again, has a lot to do with perception and how people perceive you, and you know, sometimes your identities are completely carried on the outside and are very visible, whereas sometimes our identities and all of these differences are not necessarily visible unless you explain and communicate and tell people. And I think that can be quite a different experience for people, you know, because people can't hide the color of their skin, for example, but I can hide or not tell or somehow not be perceived as a trans person wherever I go. And I think that is how my sort of identities impact on me in very different ways. And I know that people treat me differently if they know I'm a trans person or they don't, whether that's in a bad way or a positive way or unconsciously. You know, there's always a slight difference in how I'm treated, how I'm seen, what people think of me, and so on, whether that's, you know, personally or in the workplace or wherever in the spaces that I am in, you know, on the street, whatever that might mean. So I think, yeah, I guess my identities or who I am really differs on the context I'm in, on the perception of the people of me around me, and that can be very different. For example, I feel a lot safer in general in Iceland than I do in the UK. And that is also to do with society and the way I know that they treat trans people or people who they know to be trans. So yeah, it really does impact on, you know, I'm also aware that as a woman walking the streets in society, I shouldn't be walking alone at night, which is, you know, of course I should be able to, but the reality is that I'm not necessarily as safe as others that are not perceived as women. So it's interesting to me to inhibit both of these spaces at the same time, while there is also a part of people who deny my experiences and don't want to acknowledge that, whereas I know what my lived experience is. So I'm always grappling with that personal experience versus, you know, how the world perceives me and what they think of me. And that can be quite a tiring space to exist in a lot of the time. But yeah.
So thank you. Bastien or Tindara, do you have something to say on the topic?
Well, I can go if it's okay for you, Tindara. Thank you for the question. Like Ugla, actually, I feel very privileged in some ways. I'm white. I'm also queer. I would say that personally, my experience of discrimination because I'm queer has been helpful in trying to feel empathetic with other. I know that I can't really understand what it is to be a Black person or to live certain forms of violence, but I also know that I've lived some experiences that can help me to connect with people, even if it's not the same. Thinking that you can develop empathy on the basis of your experience of marginalization is something that is important, that can help you. But yes, I think that in the professional environment, I feel like a hybrid person in between institution and activity. It's not always easy to occupy this space because you feel like you don't really belong either in the activist space or in the institutional space. But in some ways it makes sense because I think that these connections are really important, and yeah, that's how I feel. It was a bit of a random idea, but
Thank you very much. Tindara, I don't know if you want to say something about it.
Yes, I would like to tell you that I come from a region of Italy that is Sicily, and when I was only 6 years old, I migrated to the north of Italy, and that was quite an experience. Because, well, it happened very many years ago, but still I can remember that feeling of, at the beginning of my experience, not being so much perceived as equal to the other. I felt for the very first time that I was diverse. And that feeling, in my opinion, is then, that was scaring me at the beginning, was then enriching me in a very important capability, the capability of feeling diverse, and also at the very beginning feeling not accepted, is really empowering me to feel that feeling with other people, and then also having experienced the possibility to act in this sense, both as a feminist, that definitely I am not a TERF, and I found this really awful that some feminists can say that they are feminists and at the very big, and that they are TERF. So this, in my opinion, is something that enriched me in listening other people, in feeling also that intersectional discrimination, and the opportunity to be also referent referee in my university, both for equal opportunity, but also in special cases as with people with disabilities or with refugees, really opened my mind to understand people and to take also their diversity with me in order to do exactly what also Ugla and Bastien were saying, to really, I really appreciate this, not, as also Bastien was saying, you do see that there are attacks, very big attack to our freedom, academic freedom of research, with what is happening in our societies, but then we can get together, diverse people as well, recognizing our diversity, our richness, and the possibility to be together to provide replies to this attack, and to really still believe in a diverse and richer society.
Thank you very much for all your intervention. It's really interesting to have your point of view on the question, because like in my case, I don't feel like I can have an intersecting identities. I'm a white cis man, even though I'm gay, I'm still don't feel a lot of discrimination. But by readings and also the witnessing of some people, we can directly understand that the way we are raised in our society is deeply racist, transphobic, misogynistic, and we have a lot of things to unlearn to be able to understand all of this concept of discrimination and intersectionality. So thank you for your interventions. I have another question, because we are here within the gathering of universities. So what I would like to ask, if working on intersectionality and in general in discrimination at the level of the university, could it be considered a little bit too late? Like, my question is, shouldn't we be working in the earlier stage? What do you think about it? I don't know. If someone wants to start, you can just raise. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely, yes. I now understand what you are meaning. Basically, that is very important to get to the very beginning of our lives. Basically, there we should talk about what it is, what are stereotypes, implicit and explicit, that can basically not accept, lead to not accept even the possibility that you are diverse. So, in my opinion, we should make alliances based also on our research, because being a researcher that on gender studies and economics of discrimination, I can very well say that the roots of what we feel are really at the very stage of our lives. So that should really be done together. And for instance, we can inform and try to promote policies that are able to bring in the very early childcare services the importance to be aware of stereotypes and to do something against these stereotypes. And there are studies that can really help also in designing policies to address these stereotypes and to make people really be able to develop their capabilities, not being basically full with the constraints about it that can come very early in our lives.
Thank you.
Yes, I go in. I agree with Tindara on that, but it's also how anti-wokeist movement they are also against the idea that we implement these policies within schools. For example, there is this moral panic about children being taught gender studies and to become, for instance, LGBTQI plus people, and so it's also working there. It's not only in universities that there is this panic. It's like everywhere, and education is also like it's really rigid. Well, I don't know if it's clear, but it's of course we should be able to talk more about this. I know that in Belgium, I don't know how to say it in English, but there's EVRAS, which is the sexual education within schools for children who are like not so children, they are more teenagers, because there is a government, but there is a law that allows us to have some discussions for 2 hours, I think, per year. And some people actually burnt schools at some point. Some parents burnt schools because 2 hours for education, sexual education, has been implemented. That's how what's happening. That's how people react when we try to educate towards equality and inclusion of diversity. It's really, really, really tough.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I think I would agree as well. I mean, I think we as people are all of these things from the moment we're born. You know, I think as someone who was raised in quite a rural place in Iceland where there wasn't a lot of talk about intersectionality, you know, we had an all-white school, except there was one person of color who was at the school, and you know they faced racism for that, but we never really talked about that within primary school as young people. But still, that person was experiencing that at a very early age, and I was quite a visible queer kid as well, so I was facing all sorts of bullying and things for that as well. So that's why I think it's important. It's not just universities that are tackling these issues; it needs to be tackled everywhere, because people exist within all of these spaces as well. And I think, yeah, it needs to be done a lot earlier and needs to be a lot more early intervention with that at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, thank you again for all the interventions. I have a third question. That's something that we have talked a little bit about is what can we do as a university or a school when we don't have the laws of the countries behind us? Because in our cases, we have the example of Iceland and Belgium that are really innovative in this era, and you gave the example, Ugla, of the UK, and Tindara, we also follow what's happening in Italy. That's not always easy for LGBTQIA plus people. So what can we do as a university if we don't necessarily have the country behind us, or the laws in general?
I don't know if I can say something, or if you
go ahead.
Basically, I can tell you that the change name policy is not really there in some universities, but also in many high school. And I think that being a university, and it is important to do this at the first time, and especially I wanted to stress, and that is again, I wanted to refer to what was to the presentation of my colleagues. Basically, I think that we could not be able to write down guidelines for change name policies in the university without the contribution of associations that we basically got together, as was suggested also from the bottom up, to understand what is a situation where you are not allowed to use your name, because, for instance, in Italy, you can take 2 years to be to have a change in your ID document, and then when you go to school, when you go to university, you can risk to be named with another name that you don't feel your own name. So in that case, in my opinion, it was very important to have LGBTQI plus association, and especially also to recognizing the problem that can be also within the LGBTQI plus communities. We have been in our group also trans association, especially telling us what they could feel in that process without the important issue of being based on self-determination. So in that case, we brought these without being an explicit law on change name policies. We brought these to the National Association of Equal Opportunities Bodies of the University. Also, the National Rectors Association of the universities got together with our proposal, and that was spread all over the universities. So what is happening now is that we can see high school that ask, that can tell, look, at the universities, they can use change name policies, or municipalities that are really very happy to share our process to allow these change name policies and to recognize its validity. So I can tell you that it is very hard, when I should say that it can be extremely even harder than it can be in Italy, to have an environment that it is not really, to say the least, friendly to what is diversity. But in that case, what we can do as university is to show that we can do something, to do it, and also to do as much as possible to change that culture, to, as also Bastien was saying before, to really say that are fake news. This is the reality based on research. I can consider the possibility that people can be blind to research, but they probably can recognize that there are also, as you, Thibaut, was saying before, important so-called side effect for everyone. That if you live in such a society, we are not really growing, we are going in the Middle Age. Having said so, I come from also, well, I see middle-aged cities are very nice, but are we really wanting to go to societies where there is not respect and the rights are not respected? So that is a very big challenge, but I think that we together can take it, this challenge, and go ahead, even if I must be, we are all aware that there are hard times, but we don't, well, we can go ahead with this challenge because we know that it is right, it is a point of justice.
Thank you again. I don't know, Bastien or Ugla, if you want to add something?
Okay, I'll go first, Ugla, if it's okay. Yes, I agree with Tindara too. I would say that they are, depending on the government where you are, there are some submarine strategies that you can put in place. For instance, if you decide to raise awareness against discrimination and inequalities, you can use if you can't, for example, speak explicitly about race or gender. You know that in Belgium, in France, there is this. It's very difficult to make data for racial minorities because there's this kind of color blindness within politics. It's really hard to talk about racism because it's really hard to make statistics on that. But there is the idea that when you can't talk about certain subject, you can use values that cannot be put in question. For instance, if you raise awareness against racism and that you want to include awareness against sexism and sexual violence and so on, you can use words like respect. You can use words like equality. So maybe use notions that cannot be countered by. Well, at the moment, it's not counted. You can't say that respect is something bad, right? So maybe visibilizing these notions that are more difficult for for these far right movements and discourses. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you said. I think there are strategies which you can use, which is focusing on those shared values that we all supposedly have. You know, if you find that common ground about, as you said, respect, everybody needs to feel safe. You can focus on these sort of shared values that we can all agree upon. And I think that's often a way into conversations around different groups and different identities, and that's strategies that I've tried to deploy, for example, in the UK, where, you know, if we're talking about young trans people, the first thing you can say, well, I think we should all agree that young people deserve to feel safe and happy. Like, who can disagree when you say things like that? So it's about finding those common values and common grounds. But I think also, as if you are a person that is existing in a country where it's very difficult to be able to talk about these issues, it's about finding a community. It's about finding your people, and it's about remembering that your community will always exist regardless of what laws are put into place or what everybody thinks about you. There's always a community to be found somewhere, even within countries where it's literally illegal to be LGBT or to be whatever it is. You can still find that community. There are still people that exist that can be there for you and support you. And I think that community is the most important when you feel the most under attack and the most underrepresented and even suppressed as well.
Once again, thank you very much. Yeah, I feel like, Bastien, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but in the case of Belgium also, we're in a strange situation where sometimes I feel that the laws are a little bit more progressive than the general population. So we also need to do some work to go along with some students to help them make some adaptation against discrimination, because there are laws that are not necessarily well followed. And it's really interesting to live in our countries with all the interesting laws for example, LGBTQIA plus people. But yeah, sometimes there is a disconnection between the laws and the population. I don't know if you feel that too, Bastien. But
yeah, exactly. There is often people believe that legal equals the social situation. This year, Belgium was second on the ILGA Europe map. So it's the map that calculates which country is the best in terms of LGBTQI rights, and Belgium was second. And then at the association, at Maison Arc-en-Ciel de Liège, we are seeing more and more people facing discrimination, facing cases of violence. Statistics show that there are more and more young people who are against LGBTQI identities. So it's going up. And while we think that the legal and the laws are protected, you can see that in the social sphere, there is a reinforcement of forms of violence. So it's not always a correlation. But of course, I'm not saying that it's not. Well, laws are very important, and laws are crucial for LGBTQI people and other minorities, but it's also crucial to protect them in the long distance. It's crucial to protect these laws. And as Ugla said, there are always people, even though there is this reinforcement of violence, there are always people who are part of our community who can be there for us, and links and connections that can be created. So that's the most that can save us, knowing that.
Yeah, I would agree. As you know, in Iceland, as I said, even though I think Iceland's in 3rd place, just behind Belgium as well on the same map as well. So, you know, even though we are ranking really, really high, we've also noticed there has been an increase in discrimination, vandalism on rainbow flags, things like that in Iceland. So even if the laws are progressive, the social sort of, I guess, impact or social values or opinions can change very quickly. And we've seen that sort of wave go across Europe and across the world, that sort of anti-human rights, anti-gender movements, anti-LGBT movements have impacted us everywhere, and it also has in Iceland. And there is now a concerted group, for example, in Iceland that's very sort of anti-LGBT that pushes towards that. So, you know, we still have to work on both of these fronts, and they are as important as each other. Whereas law offers you that legal protection, the social one is also about how you're treated on the street, at work, with your family, and so on. So all of these things are important to go together. And yeah, as you said, sometimes laws are a bit more progressive than maybe society is, and then it's about how do we make society also get up to speed with that and come to that same place. And that's a difficult thing sometimes to manage, I think.
As far as Italy is concerned, unfortunately, you might know that we are not there with a very good law in terms of contrast to homophobic, transphobic behavior. So there is not that law, and I think we need it, definitely. But also, I can take you an example, being now very close to the day of the 25th of November, which is, you know, we know it is the International Day against violence against women. But I think that we do have laws in Italy on this context, but we can see every day very high situation and femicide as well. So what we can do in that case, we have the laws. They can be definitely we can improve them. But and we have the laws against discrimination in the labor market, where we can observe issues of discrimination. So in my opinion, there is talking about the university and my own experience that I concluded on the 31st of October of Rector's Delegate of Equal Opportunities. I can tell you that it is very important, in my opinion, for instance, not only to have support, to generic psychological support, but we have introduced shelter against violence in our university, that we have now this shelter as well inside the university, and to be able to increase the possibility of having increasing the awareness of the discrimination, and also to make people being aware that they can be victim of violence, and they even don't know that. So for this, we have, for instance, using play in our theater in our university, and being in this at the end of this play, I could really consider the fact and see the fact that young people just looking at the play and in the theater, become aware of what they are passing through. And this is a way, very important way, in my opinion, to open the possibility to talk about violence, violent and toxic relationship, of course, within any kind of couple, any kind of relation, and to be able to address them. And in that case, when the law are there, then you can tell, look, you are in this situation, we can help you. There are also laws, that there are shelters that can help you. There are places where we can, there are communities as well. When these laws are not there, of course, it is much difficult, but again, we should do something. And I still hope that we'll have a proper law against discrimination, and that we can really be able also to address what is happening about homo trans biphobic behaviors in our country as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I see the first question of the participant, and one of the first one is actually the same as the last one I was planning to ask you, so it's going to be a smooth transition toward the Q&A part of the presentation. It's a first question from Priscilla that asks, how can our university allow to everyone to feel included? My question will have been kind of the same, because we have a lot of participants of mostly people working in university. So what could they do at their level? I know that in the case of Priscilla, she works in communication. What could you advise them to do at their level to help? So Bastien, you want to start? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I can start. I'm working also at university, and I'm not going to say that it's perfect, but I can tell you about my experience with the Conseil Genre Égalité, so the Gender and Equality Advisory Board. So we've put in place, there are different ways in which we can make sure that everybody feels included. One way is to raise awareness in university spaces, to create spaces where people feel safe. It can be a campaign about non-violence. It can be, as I said, in Liège, there was this campaign about respect, and it was very colorful, but it was saying that respect was necessary at university, that violence was not accepted. So it's an institutional position that is important. It shows actually to people that the institution is going to protect them if something happens. To the potential victims, it tells them that. To people who might commit violent acts, it tells them that it's not allowed. So it's twofold in a way. It's effective for people who can face some forms of discrimination, and people who might commit them. It is very much on the surface. I think that another necessary action is to have some people who can be contacted by students, by staff, member staff, to be heard. Being heard is necessary if something happens, that you can visibilize the different services that you can find at university. It's the visibility of these services that will ensure that people trust the institution. Universities have often been regarded as cultivating cultures of silence, so be silent when something happens. It's also necessary now to break the silence and to say that there are services that exist, there are laws that exist, and to reaffirm institutional positions. And as Tindara said, there are equality plans now that help us to implement measures easily.
Thank you, Bastien. I don't know, Tindara, if you want to say something.
Well, yes, I think, I can tell you that also I can provide some also optimism in the sense that what, for instance, we have done in our university was one of the very first policy that we have enacted was to have basically a network of all the LGBTQI+ association in our 2 cities within our university to really talk what were the needs, what we could do together. And it was really very nice to do this. I'm still very much connected with all the association, with the municipalities for, as I said, the READY network that go ahead with policies against homotransphobic behavior. We ourselves as university are in the network that is coordinated by the municipalities of Modena and the municipalities of Reggio Emilia. I think that communication is really very important, as Bastien was saying, because, for instance, we have this change name policy, but it cannot be known if you don't do properly a communication. So what we have done was to do a video together with students, together with the representative of the trans group in our cities, and also with a staff member, because that change name policies is now for students and for staff visiting. So it was important to do a video, and it is not just one video. We should go ahead with communication. And to say so, we have, I must tell you that it is also very important to be in a network of universities. I had the pleasure to be president of this national conference that it is still there, and we have another very nice and active president, Esther Cois, that basically we are together with different universities. So we have in this national conference of equal opportunities bodies talking drafting guidelines, then listening to each other when the problems arises. So, for instance, talking about the pandemic period, then when we were back to where we were projected to distance learning and teaching, sometimes we could have people who had still in some universities the name that was not their chosen name. So we should do something together to make the IT really very much prompt to take the new name, and that university to adopt the change name policy. So being together with network and communities, association, and other universities, other RPOs, also internationally, in my opinion, it's really very important. And as an example, a small example of networking within an Italian university, I can tell you that we had the opportunity to use a campaign that has been launched by the University of Trento that is called Finisce Qui. That means that is going to end, that there are phrases that shows possible intersectional discrimination that are very catchy. They have been done with a very good eyes in terms of communication. And then at the end, it is written very strongly that our university doesn't bear any form of discrimination, and we are against any form of discrimination, and we say finisce qui as something that it is really a value. And at the same time, we have just done a very nice campaign, thanks to the help of Marco Biagi Foundation and the important artist Anarchika, and she has been doing a very nice campaign that we are now going to spread everywhere in our department, but also in the cities, with something that it is art that can allows you to take a vision of what is happening with and then catch the intention, catch the attention, sorry, of the people, and then with written with a QR code on our shelter that we have now in the universities, with people who are able to understand and hear each other. So I think also talking, getting back also to the training. For instance, one of the action of our gender equality plan is to have a module, a training, special video, but also, of course, we have a meeting. But in our opinion, it's very important to have this done in order that every leader in every sector, in every area, every director of the departments should really, and it is free for everyone, should really do it compulsory, because sometimes there is also the feeling that there is not enough training in our structure, and that is a way, according to the gender equality plan, to really make a change, make a structural change.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, Tindara, Ugla, sorry, if you want to add something quickly on the topic.
No, not much to add. I think they've covered everything I wanted to make. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are reaching to the end of the presentation. I had a few questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer all of them. Thank you for your participation, but most of them were actually included to the first question that we answered to the roundtable. I just want to say a word about the question about Elise, about the example of L'Oréal I gave. I totally agree with everything you say about the fact that it's basically some kind of pinkwashing from their part. I do agree that it's a capitalist society, but it was also for the idea of showing something outside of the university world. But obviously, what you say is totally right. I thank you again, all three of you, for the intervention. It was really interesting. Thank you for all the input inside that you put in all the questions. Thank you for your time for this presentation. I don't know if you want to add one last thing to the presentation, something you didn't have chance to say.
To say I was stimulated by the importance to find other words to attract the attention of people. I think one of these words is dignity, because I think that every one of us should be allowed to live and feel that he or she or them have the dignity that they deserve, and that by this anti-gender movement, they are not really respected, and they risk to feel their dignity, and that is something that we cannot really accept as citizens in our society. And thank you so much for UNIgreen to having done, and to you, Thibaut, to have coordinated us, to having give us the opportunity to let our voices being heard.
Thank you, and thank you also to Agathe and Cindy for organizing everything.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to all the organizers and everyone who made this happen, and my fellow speakers, and yeah, anybody that was involved. It's been great to get the opportunity to speak, so thank you so much.
Yeah, same for me. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you to my colleague, and yes, I was very happy. It's always great to connect. Sometimes you feel isolated on an island, dealing with equality, diversity, and inclusion, and then you meet people, you talk about the issue, and you see that you're not alone facing the same issues. So it's great to keep these connections alive. Yeah.
So thank you again for all the intervention. It's not totally over. I'm just going to share my screen to give you a QR code for everyone who has attended to this presentation. You can scan the QR code and then give your opinion on the presentation. Okay, you can scan this QR code and vote for the form, and follow the forms to vote and give your opinion on the presentation. Once again, thank you everyone for attending to this presentation. Thank you to all the speakers, and have a great day.